5:30, so let's call this meeting to order. I don't see the pledge. We typically do a pledge for a workshop? Yeah, okay, so let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Karen, if you get I don't know if you want to just do a mental roll call, or if we want to do an official roll call.
Commissioner Huntash.
Here.
Councilmember Husnick.
Here.
Commissioner Finneman.
Here.
Commissioner Lorge. Commissioner Erickson.
Here.
And Commissioner Roberts.
Here. Okay, the first item is 2022 budget discussion. I don't know who's going to lead that, maybe Dan?
Yep, I'll take that. Members of the EDA, you want to get me some? Tonight we'll be talking about the 2022 EDA budget. As I just get kind of teed up here from my technology standpoint, just to sort of provide some context of how we got to where we are today. If you recall, back in July, we sort of had the initial scoping meeting with the EDA, where we started looking at, are there anything outside of our current work plan, any other initiatives that the EDA wants to take on for 2022, just so we could start to, at a staff level, start to look at what the budget impacts of that would be, to incorporate that into the budget. The feedback received during that meeting is incorporated into the proposal that's here tonight. Also, as part of the presentation this evening, one thing I did do is I went out and just kind of did some comparisons with other cities to kind of see where do we rank versus our metro or our peer cities in the metro, just to see what our budget numbers are comparative to those numbers. And I do have the results of that as well. One thing that when you're looking at comparable budgets, there's a lot of nuance within every city's budget in terms of what's included in their EDA budget. So I did my best to, if there was anything major within the budget that was a major difference between how we fund things versus how other cities fund them, I did try to include those in the notes. So for example, Lino Lake's budget is $108,000, but $72,500 is a pass-through to their Convention Visitors Bureau. So that's not a levy impact, that's through their CVB gets passed through. So I tried to demonstrate that through the notes section and included that in my memo. But just wanted to give everybody here an idea of how other cities are funding their EDAs. The budget numbers that you have here on the chart are from 2021, and then I did a population estimate from 2019 based off what I found on Google. So these are current numbers that are there. The list of comparable cities here is based on the list of comparables that we typically use within the city when we are going out to do some comparisons. There's a few on there, like Cottage Grove, for example, which is not on the official list, but a few that we typically have on there, I was not able to find their EDA budgets easily on the website, so I did not include those. So we have here a total of 9 cities that I went out and took a look at. And when you compare it out, the average across the board of all 9 cities was average. They have approximately $214,000 is what they're allocating towards their EDA when you average it out. If you drop out Hastings out of that analysis, which is obviously a little bit of an outlier there with $466,000 in there, that number does drop back a little bit to approximately $202,000. So it does skew down a little bit if you drop out the outlier of Hastings. But when you compare Forest Lake at $50,000, we're definitely on the low end of market when you compare to how other cities are funding their EDAs. I also looked at, so if other cities are out there, with higher budget numbers, what are they spending their money on? What are they allocating the resources to? The primary thing that I did see when I went out to market was a lot of EDAs have dedicated staff within their EDA department that focus solely on EDA activities. Currently in the city of Forest Lake, we have 0 FTE allocated to the EDA budget, so there's no staff that's fully dedicated or being charged to the EDA fund. So when you compare it to other cities, a lot of other cities have staff associated with them. They also have increased marketing budgets. When you look at other cities that are in there, another line item that does come across is they have a bigger increase in how they market themselves to developers, to outside agencies. The marketing dollars are significantly higher than what we currently have here within the city. 3 and 4, the consultant work and studies and planning. These kind of go hand in hand. A lot of EDAs also spend, kind of similar to how we have here in the past, on developing studies and planning activities, for the cities, and then also engaging with consultants to start executing on that work. So if you go across the board with the cities that I looked at, that was a common thread through how they allocate their funds. Pass-through activities, I put this on there because if you look at other cities that were in there, you did see that noted quite a bit as pass-through activities. What that entails is a lot of times with the Conventioners and Visitors Bureau, those dollars come in through the EDA and then pass through out of the EDA towards the agency that actually engages with those marketing efforts for that city. So for example, Lionel Lakes, they have it classified as pass-through, so the dollars come in for the CVB, pass through the EDA fund and go to whatever agency that they contract with for their CVB work. The final thing that I did see consistently across the budgets was the business incentive packages. So a lot of cities have dollars allocated to their business incentive packages. These can be for abatements, for incentive improvements like we currently have with our downtown project. Some of them also have, funding a revolving loan fund. And a lot of times they have money kind of set aside within their EDA fund that they can then use if a bigger project comes in. They have business incentive money already there, so they don't have to sort of mid-budget season try to scramble to find an incentive package for a potential business that potentially is going to come into the city, or a business that's expanding within the city that may need some incentive dollars to make that project come to fruition. So that's what I saw when I went out to see how other cities are allocating their resources, which brings us to what's being proposed tonight for the 2022 budget proposal. To kind of set where we are currently with the budget, I do have here the 2021 budget amount for the EDA is $50,000. So we're currently at 50. What's being proposed here tonight is to increase that to 150,000. And I do know that that is a sizable increase in terms of EDA budget. But one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at the EDA budget is to view it as an investment. There's a real possibility that the efforts that these dollars can bring back, you can bring back, businesses that will land here. You can bring back expansion opportunities. You can bring back, land development. So you can see the expansion of the tax base as a result of these activities. So, well, yes, it's an increase, but also view that as an investment in the city. You're really laying that groundwork to get those, to build that community where businesses want to come in here and expand their business or site their business here within the city of Forest Lake. So what I ended up doing with the budget proposal was basically broke it down into 6 categories. The first category is operations. This is basically legal, engineering fees, supplies, basically what we need to do to keep the lights on for the ADA. Currently that's at $15,000, just at a slight increase of $16,500 for next year. That's, again, that's more the lights on. That's every year we spend those in operational dollars. What I have down here below is basically taking that 150 and then breaking it apart into categories based on, what I saw, based on the feedback, and sort of what I anticipate coming in 2022. And sort of my thought tonight was to go through, I have these broken down in subsequent slides. We'll kind of go through each one and kind of pause at each category for feedback and for questions versus trying to go through them all and get feedback at the end. It's probably easier to just kind of go through these one by one. So the first one that I have, first category is a downtown incentive. I did do an increase here to $30,000. We don't have an official budget amount for the downtown incentive. Right now it's at around $15,000. But I did increase it for 2022 with the anticipation that I do believe we're gonna see increased demand for it. For 2 reasons is that 1, we're currently reevaluating our criteria for that, which we're doing a pretty big expansion in terms of what areas within the city qualify for it. And we're also putting it in on a graduated scale. So smaller projects that wouldn't have qualified for the old one potentially now would qualify for some incentive dollars. So I think based on those 2 criteria, I do anticipate increased demand in 2022 for that, which is why I recommended a $30,000 category here for the incentive. Additionally, at the end of the year, if we don't fully allocate or don't fully spend out that $30,000, those unspent funds would then stay within the EDA fund to build up that fund balance. So if we do see a larger project that comes to town that does need some incentive, we have those here. So in essence, we can fund the immediate need, but also start to build for those future needs where if we start to see a project come in down the road that may need some bigger incentive dollars, we'd have those funds available to spend. So that's the downtown incentive category. Anybody have any questions or comments on this particular category?
How many did we pay out to last year?
Well, currently this year we're at 2.
20,
We're at 2 right now, and then there's 2 more potentially coming in. But I haven't, I've had a few conversations with businesses, but I don't have any formal applications. One's officially paid out as of right now, and then one is approved pending the demolition of the building, and that one gets paid out.
And then you've had conversation with 2 more?
2 additionals,
Okay.
correct. But I don't have applications, I don't have active applications on them, but I've had a few business owners reach out asking about the specific program.
And just to, so that's at 5,000 apiece, so 20,000 total then? Is that
Correct, yeah, if everything were to have to
Potentially.
get paid out. I believe, one of those will probably end up getting paid out in 2022. But yeah, right now, if everything came up and was approved to be 20,000 for 2021.
We had do you need this? We had a slight expansion of the territory we're incorporating. Can you tell me what you think the other expanded criteria would be, or the change in criteria? Would it be an amount or an allocation toward certain funds we're not allocating toward today?
Yeah, and I don't have the exact dollar figures in front of me of how it's broken down, but right now it's a $40,000. You have to spend over $40,000 on an exterior improvement to qualify for the program. The new criteria that has not been approved yet, but is currently being developed, stages that in increments. So I believe it's up to 10,000, you get 1,000, up to 20, it's 2. Don't hold me to those numbers, but it's kind of a graduated scale. So if you have a smaller project, say a $20,000 project, you'd still would qualify for a portion of that incentive dollars. Because I've had a few business owners comment that the access point is too high, that there's a barrier to entry into this program. They're doing smaller projects, so that's a response to that.
Oh, and that's what I was concerned about. I think it's nice to have that lower criteria established, yes.
Correct.
Any other questions on this piece of it?
Yeah, and that money is paid back in form of tax relief, is that how it's done?
Yeah, it's currently being switched over to an incentive. I think there's again, I don't have the criteria right in front of me what the wording is, but I believe it's more of a grant program, what it's gonna be. But in essence, it's a grant for if you come back with expenses that qualify in a project that qualifies, you get some of that money back from the city, up to 5,000.
All right.
So in general, is ED okay with the 30,000 there? Do you want any adjustments to that amount?
Yeah, so just to clarify, so we're gonna go through this, and then we're not setting it tonight, then it'll be come back for official vote, right? Is that kind of as far as our piece of the, or are you
Yeah,
asking?
it's more for feedback at this
Yeah,
point.
okay.
Obviously, if I'm way off the mark or something, or if we're missing, drastically.
Yeah, the other thing is that we are going to present to the council on next Monday the budget, so we will stick with this unless there's any changes, but that doesn't mean we can't change. We've got until December. As you may or may not know, I think most of you do, is that we have to set the levy by the end of September. But that levy is only an estimated levy. What we usually do is work through the rest of September, October, November, and adjust things as they come along, particularly in some of the revenues that we don't get notification on from the state. So there's time to adapt and to reevaluate what we're doing.
Perfect.
And to build out that point, you'll see as we get a little bit further down, a few of these are still relatively placeholder. We're still a little bit, I don't really know what the number for 2022 is gonna be yet. I'm still making an educated guess at this point, so. This is, again, the next one here is an employee. This is the biggest change probably from the EDA. So this would allocate a full-time FTE to the EDA. Anticipating a mid-year start on this one, not looking at a January start, so we've allocated the budget down lower to accommodate for a half-year position, but full-time once they start. So starting in July through the end of the year, it would be a full-time position. Don't have a final position description at this point. It's still, we're relatively early on working with Pat in terms of sort of what do we want this position to do, how does it interface with other, departments within the city. But some of the initial thoughts that we're looking at is that this position would be designed to execute those EDA initiatives. A couple of ideas would be primarily focused on business outreach and communication. I think this has been some feedback I've received from the business community that we're not as proactive in reaching out to them as we probably should be. I think, especially in terms of as we go from a planning standpoint for downtown to an execution on that downtown planning, communicating with businesses is going to be important. And I think in order to do that effectively, we do need to have an additional employee to carry that water, to go do that work. One way to look at this is by adding an employee, it'll help the EDA move from more of a reactive foothold to a proactive foothold. We'll be able to be more proactive with reaching out to local businesses, to developers. Instead of always having to be reactive to what comes across our desk, we can go out there and start to, pound the pavement, so to speak. So we are looking at, this budget does envision adding an FTE to the EDA. I'd be looking for questions or comments on that.
Was the 43,750 is that a half-year number or a full-year number?
It's a half-year number for 2022.
So for $87,000 something, you have a pretty competent person coming on board.
Correct.
And I like that idea that they can do a lot more. I'm just curious, I know you're still formulating this idea. I think you're still the clearinghouse of most things. So as that travels through, do you see that person really supporting you most of the time?
Yes. So I mean, my vision for this is to be, take business communications, for example. I don't have time in my day to go out there and actively sit down with 5 or 6 businesses if we have a project that's coming through Forest Lake. So in a previous life, when I first started working in government, my position was I'd go out and interface with businesses as a liaison. I would go in there, sit down with them, I mean, obviously be respectful of their time, but establish that relationship. So if a project came forward, I didn't have to go into a cold call situation. I had the relationship with the owner. I could say, oh, by the way, we're looking at this. You have any feedback on it? If they had feedback for the city, they could then come back and bring it back to me. So it does allow for that work to be directed out and be more engaged versus right now it's sort of as I stated, it's more of a reaction at this point where it's sort of like a scramble. We could be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more proactive in outreach to not only local businesses, but also, businesses that would potentially want a site here. They could, I guess one option, they could theoretically appointment set, if they want to get a business in, somebody wants to come in, they could be that sort of first point of contact if they had, and then come in and meet with other city staff as well.
I think we've needed this staffing increase for quite some time, so I'm happy to see that. And I'm happy to see there's the dollars assigned to it, because I think that kind of capable individual, if they're gonna be at the 86 or something category there, they're gonna have a capability that I think we'll need.
Yeah, and a couple questions. These other communities that we compared to, do you have a sense of, do they have full-time staff in that budget?
They do. So they will have, and the roles are varied. I am reaching out to other cities right now to kind of see how they're staffed and what their position descriptions look like, and to see what's working and what's not working. I just haven't had time to fully parse out that, review at this point. But most other cities will have either 1 or 2 FTEs associated to that to be more proactive and go out to that community members or attend, developers events and really get those relationships started. So when you go to these events, as I said last year when I went back to Mencar with Chris, I sat next to Cottage Grove, who was a pretty proactive, engagement, team, and how much more engagement they got with developers versus me being the new person in the room was pretty telling. I mean, they had long conversations. They would come over to me, ask me who I was, and then go over there because they had relationships with them. And we're just trying to build those relationships with those developers. So if a project does come forward, they think of Forest Lake, and hopefully we'll cite those projects here.
And that's where you view this position as potentially revenue generating?
Correct. Yes, I mean, and if you look at if they land or if we can use this position, those relationships, and a big project comes into town, you're expanding your tax base, you're broadening it up and you're making it more robust. And I think that's where you see the investment come back, from an investment standpoint.
Well, I'm a big fan of the idea. I mean, this is setting us up for a $200,000 budget in 2023 when you factor in a full year. So I'm just curious, since EDA has been the benefactor of, staff time thus far without a line item, can you help, just us and anybody that's curious, like what kind of value, staff time have we already been the benefactor of from staff that, really will be incorporated into this position? You follow my question?
So are you asking for like what's unallocated? So like, if I take my time, then what's not allocated to the EDA currently?
No, like what part of your time is allocated?
Oh,
Like,
what
we're
is?
already getting city staff, right, in interactive mode, and I like the idea of going to a full-time staff person that can be proactive, as you've described. I mean, we've just had an underfunded budget because your job hasn't been rolled into our budget, right?
Correct. I think what you're getting is more outreach and more proactivity to the business community, which we really don't have the staff time to do now. I mean, Dan and I, we have other things to do as well as EDA. I think that if we can either put a new position, rearrange duties, whatever that might turn out to be, that you're really starting to get out into the community where we haven't really done that before. We're really trying to actively recruit or interface with whoever we possibly can get a hold of and try to get them to come to Forest Lake.
And I think to build off what Pat mentioned there is I still think that part of my time would still be dedicated to this group. So you're getting, again, the benefit of me being there, not allocated to it, but then you'd have one person that would be, their wage would be here within the budget. And to your point about setting it up for another increase in '23, because this is only a half year, there are some budget items in here right now that are one time in 2022 that won't be reoccurring in 2023. So we can, I did do a quick back of the napkin calculation to see what does this look like if I have to take a full-time position and fund that in '23, because obviously, you know, you take it on full-time, you gotta fund that ongoing. And without having to do a sizable increase just for the employee standpoint, with the adjustments within our current budget, it is feasible off the 150. It may hamstring a couple other projects a little bit, but if you kept the same budget items for 2 years, same levy amount, you would be able to fund the full-time position. But you may have to make some decisions on what other programming you may have to either reduce just slightly as a result of that.
The senior bus system is no longer part of an EDA story.
Correct.
And do we have any kind of reserve amount we still have at this point in time? I know we've spent big this last year, but do we have a reserve amount remaining?
I think it's right around 100,000 is what I anticipate coming in. Don't hold me to that number, that could shift slightly, because we did spend down quite a bit with the liquor license refunds at the beginning of the year, as well as the city's commitment to the downtown planning project as well. So I don't have the exact total, but I believe it's somewhere right around, I think we should end up approximately about 100,000, give or take a
Thank
little
you.
bit.
So could this position, would this position be instrumental in helping, like, let's say a new business wants to come to town and really navigating through the zoning and everything that it takes?
Yeah, I mean, they can definitely be like, sort of like that go-to point person to say if it's a, you know, and again, it's gonna depend upon final position design, you know, in terms of, you know, what they actually end up doing, but it could be, they could be in that liaison role where, you know, the business owner needs somebody to come in and say, hey, how do I do X? And they wanna go to sort of what they would view as more of a neutral third party. They could go there and that person takes it up within the departments, within the city, to sort of shepherd that process through a little bit.
I think that part is key, you know, to being able to help someone come in and navigate that. And as part of that role, I think that's huge and would be very helpful.
And it may sound like a trite point, but if that person, in the developer world, if that person could be titled Director of the EDA, something, I don't know, funneling through that idea of that mainstay person has an impact out there.
And I think too, as the position gets designed, my thoughts on it is to get feedback from the business community, just to see what they, you know, where are our gaps, you know, in need, you know, to make sure that it's reflective of not everything the business community wants. I mean, obviously we have our own city needs as well, but to make sure that we do and listen to that feedback from the business community saying we need help with X, Y, or Z, and try to tailor as much as we possibly can to assist that.
Do you feel that ultimately the council has to make the decision to approve this, and not really knowing what the other increases are in the budget? Does the council have the stomach to approve something like this? I mean, it's a pretty big increase, so.
You're asking us to answer that one? You know, that's.
What's your sense? And maybe Sam could
The city
weigh in a
council
little.
will make their decision based on the whole picture of the budget, which is always the case. Where there's demands here, there's also demands everywhere else, obviously. This increase, if you compare it to last year's levy, is less than 1%, about 0.9% of an increase on the tax levy. I never predict city councils. So I've done this for a while, so I don't think they'll have a problem discussing it. It's just a matter of how this stacks up with the other demands.
Total levy is something that we get the comments on, you know,
That's what you always get the comments on.
and so we're all trying to keep that reasonable.
Yeah, and there's other pressures that the city council had. For example, we just lost $95,000 in state aid because we got too big. So that's a big loss for the city. That's about a 1% loss as well. So we'll present the picture on the 30th and see where we go from there.
So, go ahead.
So will the EDA have any input as to hiring when this position is out there for applicants?
In terms of what?
Did any say? You know, I just think it's important that, you know, when the time comes, that the person really fits into our vision for what we want to get done.
EDA will certainly be involved somewhere, somehow in the process. That's yet to be determined.
I think I've already kind of glorified the position in my own head a little bit more than I should, because I find it important, lots of the cities that have the EDA director and what have you, that really focus on their connection, that the outside world funnels through them, comes to them. They are the first hit in the city staff when you're organized differently. I was just curious if this comes up as an underling who doesn't have that ability to, you know, be the point man.
I think at this point, I mean, that's going to be kind of determined in terms of what the ultimate, I mean, obviously, we're relatively early on in the process in terms of looking at the position, you know, and I think what those needs are, because obviously we have to, you know, package up the position, and I think to your point, is it going to be, you know, where does that level out, you know? Will be reflective of what the needs are, you know, of the EDA, of the business community, and of the city in general, you know, and I think from there, that's where those decision points. I think for me to speak to that right now is going to be premature. You know, I want to see what other cities are doing this first, you know, to kind of make sure that, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to, if they're effective with what they're currently, if their current position design is effective in, say, you know, another city, trying to mimic that and make some small changes to make it tailored to Forest Lake, I think is a better start than trying to whole class something that's completely, you know, untested. I want to kind of go back and get some market test on it before I, you know, comment into where they are in terms of structure within the city. That's my non-answer to that question.
Well, I think that you have good feedback there. I think we're pretty favorable of this. We'd like to have some say in it at some point, but I think it's it's something that's well needed and a good plan to move forward with.
And these are the remaining items that I have kind of categorized out, and these will be subject to change, you know, kind of depending as we get kind of a little bit further along here. In 2022, we are going to have some carryover planning expenses, you know, as we have to cycle this planning, the downtown planning from 21 and 22. There is some planning expenses that will carry over. I looked at roughly where we are from a billable hour standpoint on a current plan. I figure we're probably going to have about a third of that work left over in the 22. So I approximately put 20, that's about, that 25,000 represents about a third of the total cost of the planning process. That number can definitely change based on where the actuals come back in at. So you could see that number go down a little bit. I anticipate it probably will go down. I think I probably was a little bit conservative in my estimate there, but wanted to make sure we had enough to cover planning activities for 22. Contract services, here we're looking at, again, if we renew the chamber BR&E agreement that we currently have with the chamber, if we bring on ULI for a study, or if we do any additional studies, you know, trying to leverage dollars with the, you know, Washington County CDA, want to make sure that we have some fund balance there or some dollars allocated to allow those activities to take place as well. And then the final item here is a downtown plan execution. Remember that we're going to be going from a planning standpoint in 22 to an execution standpoint. I don't want to lose a full budget cycle having to wait for, 24 to start, or excuse me, 23 to start executing on that plan. So I will have a better picture of what those projects will look like. I did ask Bruce to say, I know we're early on in the process right now, but can you at least give me some, low hanging fruit that are low impact or low dollar amount but high impact things that we can at least start to evaluate. He's still looking at that right now, but I wanted to put a placeholder in here for 22. So that's the remainder of that. So if any questions or comments on what kind of rounds up the budget for 22?
The downtown plan execution, that doesn't incorporate, what's incorporated, where we start to do the cost analysis of the planning session thing we're doing downtown. That cost analysis is not part of this, or it is?
So that CIP that Bruce will provide, when we get our plan in 22, we'll have a plan, and then here's all the dollars to execute that plan. At this point, I don't know what that project is gonna look like. I don't know if it's gonna be 100,000, 200, 5 million, 10 million, 20, I don't know what those numbers are gonna be at this point, 'cause I don't have the CIP yet for it. But to at least start, so we don't get caught flat-footed, get the plan, get it approved, and not have anything to do in 23, 22, I wanted to at least get some money there to start the execution standpoint. So we will have a full CIP that then in subsequent years, I can then plug in to budgets to make sure that we're funding that execution of that downtown plan adequately in future years. But this right now is a placeholder, and that dollar could change based on the project list that Bruce comes back. He just had not given me a project list by the time I developed this.
Remember, what is ULI?
That's the Urban Land Institute. They came out and did a workshop for us, and they sort of gave us our initial market position. But they also analyzed the downtown plan. They'll also analyze it's an example of what you can do for contract services. It's not that the recommendation at this point, it's just more of a placeholder to say, what can you do for that, 10 grand?
Any other questions on this? I think, is that enough direction to
Yeah, I mean, and Pat alluded to this too, just the overall impact on city levy. Right now we're right about 1%, but we don't have that total impact at this point. So we'll have a better picture as we get a little bit further along. The purpose of the night was just to get some initial feedback on the numbers, see if I'm missing anything, if you want to adjust something. This is sort of that first cut of the budget for 22. And, again, just looking for feedback, but I'll leave this up here, so if any kind of final feedback, I'll be happy to take it.
Maybe a follow-up question on the employee. You chose a July start. Is it just kind of random? Are we expecting that's what it'll take to kind of get it all ramped up? I mean, is that a feasible start date?
It's a feasible start date. That's that mid-year start date. I didn't want to try to do like a 3-quarter. I think realistically, by the time we get budgets approved in December, you recruit for the position, you advertise for it, you define it, do the finalization, approvals, development. A July start's pretty realistic on that.
Okay, next item is staff updates. I want to take this time just now to acknowledge the loss of Forest Lake Police Department has experienced with the loss of Sergeant Koash. I've had many opportunities to have conversations with him and how he's helped businesses and doing, coming in for like alarms going off, but he did pass in a unfortunate accident over the weekend, so our thoughts and
I
prayers
didn't know that.
are to him and Ashley and his family, so. Are you gonna lead the staff update then? Or?
Yeah, I have a couple of staff updates. The first update I have is in regards to this past weekend out at the Forest Lake Airport. The airport held the fly-in event. And as a part of that, the new commercial hangar out there, which is Hangar 97, had an open house. And there's been some questions just sort of about what is Hangar 97, what businesses what are they engaged in, what are they gonna be doing. Just want to let the EDA know that any business-related activity out at the airport does have to be aviation-related. The main reason behind that is a lot of funding for the airport does come from MnDOT Aeronautics, and they have pretty tight regulations on what you can and can't do out there from a business standpoint. On top of that, you also have FAA requirements, you have all the MnDOT regulations, you have the local airport standards, you have local, the local standards as well. So there's a lot of, to get a business to work out there, you have a kind of a narrow target with which to make sure that you're following all of those different guidelines. I am planning on meeting with the owner of Hangar 97 later this week to actually discuss what are your plans, you know, to kind of get a fact set of, here's what I'm envisioning for the space, here's what I want to do for the space, and then based on that feedback, work with him to develop a plan and see what we can and cannot allow to have happen out there. So just wanted to let the EDA know that, you know, I'm aware that Hangar 97 is out there. I've been working with them ever since they started with their initial project back in, I think, 2018 is when they first came to the city. They've pivoted slightly on their original business plan. It's been sort of a moving target. But I wanted to make sure that when I do meet with them, that I get the actual, here's what we want to do, so we can work on what we have to do from a regulatory standpoint to allow that to happen, if we can allow those activities to happen out there. Also was working with the airport to develop use standards. These use standards were recommended to be by MnDOT Aeronautics to get into place, and these are standards that basically oversee how businesses operate out there to ensure a level playing field. So it's basically, they kind of go through the nuts and bolts of what it takes to operate the airport, to kind of operate businesses out there, to make sure that everybody sort of is in line with, if I want to do this type of business, here's what I need. If I want this type of activity, here's what I need. So they recommended that we work through that process to really establish a level playing field out at the airport. So as part of my meeting with the owners of Hangar 97, we'll also be kind of starting that process for use standards out there, because they obviously have to live within those use standards, and I want their feedback on that process as well. So that's the update I have on Hangar 97. I just know that there's been some questions about that, and, you know, just wanted to provide the EDA that staff is aware of it, and we are meeting with them later this week to kind of go through get a better idea what they're planning for that space out there at the airport.
Could I ask Sam, you intimately know what's going on out there, so did they grow up through an approval process through the, you know, our local association or the airport?
Oh, sure, when they,
So, and when they grew up through that process, did that definition of use shift at all? Because I know there's a history of fighting component pieces of business within the hangars.
one of the things that they are on a commercial lot, that's number one. See, the other businesses out there weren't. And the difference is that they have public access to the back of the hangars.
Okay.
Everybody else, the private hangars, you access your own hangar by way of a taxiway. So it's not public. It's public to aircraft, but it's not public, you know, for a business. And so that's part of it. And then the other thing that I tell people too, you know, he's got lots of ideas, but in his particular business, it could be, you know, aircraft storage, it could be maintenance, it could be aircraft brokerage, aircraft insurance sales, could be aircraft sales. There's all kinds of things that can go on and still meet that criteria as far as the aviation thing. What he's done too is he's contacted MnDOT and getting their blessing what he's doing out there, because they have an 80% say. They paid for 80% of the infrastructure, they paid for 80% of that property out there. They paid for 90% of the runway. And so they have a big voice to determine what's okay and what isn't. And whatever he's doing, you know, after the 5 days a week thing is pretty incidental to the use of the hangar.
Well, that public road then feeds land yet that's
Yeah,
out there, and that would all be commercial possibilities, commercial airport
Right.
land.
The
And
idea is,
all of that would have an opportunity to be more than the restrictions that exist on the private.
sure, the idea is that hopefully someday we can extend that road to the north,
Sure.
that, you know, and then make room for a couple more hangars. And
But presently, there is room for some more.
I think the engineers were saying we'd probably to be able to get 2 or 3 more in there before, and then you have a wetland issue.
Sure. And we have then all the other criteria that might go once it
But
becomes a commercial.
anything from his hangar up, all the way back around to where it makes the curve there, that's all commercial, and they do pay more, they pay a higher rent there too, so.
So with that additional land that's available for additional things, I'm just presuming they have to go and live with planning commission criteria in terms of parking or anything else that they would have for an aspect of their business that intrudes like an event would.
It's more airport commission than it is planning commission
Is it?
because of the aeronautical part of it.
And do you have like parking requirements as well within your ordinances? Whatever you call
Not at the
them?
moment. No, it's just that everybody's, you know, in that public area. So the you can, if you own a hangar out there and it's a private hangar, you can park within your area that you've rented, that you're leased, as long as you don't block the taxiways.
Okay, and so they're not necessarily leasing that public road and that random parking that's sitting behind it at this point. I mean, 15,000, what did the paper say, 15,000 square feet, to me represents quite the event
That's-
center,
That, I don't know where that number came from, because it's
Yeah.
not even
They
close.
can't
isn't
do
it?
that.
Oh, no, that's, no. That,
What do you think the number is?
I think that building is around 8,000 square feet, something like that.
On the footprint, not
Mhm.
counting upstairs?
Right.
Okay. Well, it's still sizable.
It's just mezzanine,
Yeah.
it's up there, so.
Well, and VIP spacious up there.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that 15,000 number came. It's
Okay, well,
just-
that's what I was reacting to, because that takes
Yeah.
a good deal of support.
And I think just to, on that point of the parking side of it too, is one thing to also review is that with the aeronautical use, a lot of that parking is gonna come in on the airplane side of it too. So that's unique. It's not just all gonna be car traffic, it's all gonna be
Aircraft.
fly-in traffic that comes in. So it's gonna be, how do you then park the planes too? So, I mean, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, which is the intent of the meeting is to say, you know, how are you gonna interact with the space? What can we do from a parking standpoint? How do we solve parking issues? You know, if you are gonna have events out there, you know, how are you gonna park the planes, where your planes go that you hangar during that, you know, so there's a lot of stuff that we need to get hammered out prior to events, so we can kind of have clear paths for everybody to operate out there at the airport.
Virtually every airport in Minnesota does such a thing. They have events going on here and there, you know. And it could be an aeronautical event. It doesn't need permission to do that at all. So, if you had a pilot seminar or something like that, or if he's trying to do something with the public, whatever, so.
What it seems like they're advertising is a wedding event center. That is kind of what they're really advertising. And that's where that 15,000 square foot number came from, is their material. So it was brought to my attention, this goes back to, you know, as EDA, we're asked to go out and talk to different businesses and survey, and if there's any red flags and stuff, I had someone come to me and asking questions and didn't know anything about it, so I inquired with Patrick. And so I think it could be a great opportunity for the city and bring people into town. I just hope that it's on a level playing field and the same requirements as much as possible that anyone else would have to if they want to open up an event center somewhere else. And I think parking is a huge aspect of that, so.
Especially out there, because you only have, I think, around 10 spaces that are all public, and they're not, you can't reserve them. And the unique thing about the airport too is that anything outside of the leased area is all city-owned, so they don't have quote-unquote a front yard or a backyard, that's all city property, or city and MnDOT owned property, that's all around that, so it's held in common, so it's not like you can just, you know, take over city property. So there's a lot of pathways that need to get sort of figured out there for moving forward.
So at this point, then, until that's all worked out, would there be an event that's allowed out there?
I'm meeting with him I'm letting him know, at this point, we gotta get the pathways figured out before we start going forward on anything at this point, just to make sure that we're just sort of not allowing things to happen out there prior to, or having that influence, you know, policy development.
One of the things he's agreed to is that if he's in public property, that he rents that property for the day.
Oh.
Last time it was a $500 check. So, I mean, I think there's some positives out there. I think there's some things that can be worked out. It's still a MnDOT issue.
Questions?
And I would suggest talking to the owner.
Yeah,
Talk to the
Well,
owner.
that's a dead
That's
end.
It's gonna,
Yeah, but I mean, any one of you can do that. So,
questions on that? Thanks for addressing that.
I just have one more quick update from on August 12th, I spoke at the the Real Estate East Metro Developer Conference, gave a presentation on the Headwaters 123 parcel and the city's involvement in the technology corridor. Got good feedback on the presentation, and after it, had a developer come up and ask questions about Forest Lake. Wasn't particular tied to Headwaters, but kind of wanted to know just in general about city of Forest Lake, wanted to learn more. So I'm working to get a meeting set with them to come out here and, you know, sort of kick the tires, so to speak, on the city of Forest Lake. So that was a positive that came out of there. I'm also speaking at the Land Development Summit on September 15th, and right now I'm scheduled to go to the MnCAR conference in October with Chris to represent the city and the technology corridor in tandem again. So starting some of that outreach.
So you are our acting director right now.
I'm the pitch man for the
Thank
city.
you. Thank you.
I go out there and I, you know, put on my salesman hat as much as I can and promote the city. So that's all I have from an update standpoint.
It's good to be able to be having these events back in session and happening. Okay, Chris, if you have any updates from the county?
Thank you, Chair Roberts, and members, good afternoon, good evening. I do want to thank Dan. I think he did a wonderful job at that panel. He spoke with Rachel Juba from Hugo and Bruce Saylor from Connexus Energy about the Minnesota Technology Corridor and put some really good plugs in for Forest Lake, and I think it was one of the best panels of the day, so very well done. Looking forward to the land conference coming up on the September 15th, as Dan mentioned, and we're going to be talking about opportunities up in the Forest Lake area and the land that you've got for sale, obviously, and trying to get some more interest and spark some activity and see if we can't turn some dirt soon. I do want to just mention briefly one of the goals of the EDA and one of the goals of the CDA, the Washington County CDA as well, is to work with the schools. And tomorrow, the Forest Lake High School is holding their 3rd annual career launch kickoff event, and they've asked me to speak on a panel. We've been working with several different school districts across the county, and actually have put them in touch with Forest Lake because Forest Lake's program is so far advanced and so well respected across the county. So a lot of the other school districts in the county are trying to model what Forest Lake is already doing at the high school. And tomorrow, really, the goal is to make connections between businesses and students and the education piece and the employment piece, because we still, and we did hear it at the conference last week and the week before, is that the number one concern that site selectors have right now is not incentives, it's not about buildings, it's about talent and the availability of people. And we hear it over and over and over again. So tomorrow we're going to be kicking off that event at the high school. It starts at 8 o'clock. And I know it's a goal for the EDA, and it certainly is for the county CDA as well. And just talking about opportunities and how do we make those connections with businesses to make sure that the students know what opportunities are out there and available, and how do you place those students in potential internships at those local businesses, and just trying to bridge that gap. So I'm looking forward to that tomorrow, and that's it for my update. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Chris? Okay.
Could you just describe the land summit, September 11 or whatever date you said it was at? Do you call it a land summit? Did you?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
The meeting you're going to have in September, where you're going to go and
Yeah, it's September 15th. It's at the Golden Valley Country Club, and it's through the Minnesota Real Estate Journal. It's called the Land Development Summit. And primarily the attendees are site selectors, realtors, developers, businesses that are looking for those land opportunities. And so you might be among maybe 100 people that are looking for that next project, and who do they call if they get an inquiry.
Okay, thank you.
Just to piggyback off Chris's comment on the career launch, I still have them on the calendar, or trying to get them back on the calendar to come here to present. That was teed up right before COVID hit, and then I know they went remote, and they were kind of gotten busy trying to reevaluate or tool their program to allow for COVID. So now that we're kind of getting back into an in-person schedule, I'm going to reach back out to career launch and have them come back in here to let you know, or kind of give you that firsthand knowledge of what the program is, and establish that connection between the EDA and the career launch program at the high school.
Anything else for Chris? I don't see this on the agenda, but a chamber update, Nanette?
Good evening, everyone. I do have a list of things, and so I'd like to share. We have our Business Education Day coming up on Thursday this week, so that's the day where we welcome all the new teachers to the area, so all the Forest Lake teachers, as well as Leela, Lakes International. And so I believe we're at about 133 people for that event. And in the midst of the summer, we've been getting our software implemented, and so I'm excited about that. That has launched, and our folks are responding well to that. And it does feed into our website, which is also great, because I've been working, it's been a domino effect, right? And one of the things, there's two things actually that I want to mention. There's community events on that, so Dan, maybe we need to confer about getting some of that stuff overlapped, as well as jobs. And so for our members, it's a great opportunity, but there's also some community pieces now that are on our website that are quite valuable. And then also, speaking about meetings and career force and HKGI, we did do our first initial meeting with Bruce from HKDI on last week. And so it was a small group of business professionals that have been part of our business recovery, growth, and revitalization task force, and Dan was also with us. And so it was great for a small group to really have some great conversation with him and give their insight into what they really felt. And then Bruce had asked if we could go bigger. So in September, then we're doing our first chamber breakfast since COVID. And so he'll be featured at that as well. So Dan, I'm supposed to let you know September 14th. I'll email you. So that's coming up so that he can have an opportunity to meet with a larger group and do his presentation. And then in October, actually, Career Force, we're hoping that, I have to talk to Molly, and so they're taking what you're doing tomorrow and bringing it to the businesses, and hopefully in October. So kind of piggybacking on what you were sharing, Chris. And then last, I thought I'd let you know that the Chamber has partnered with the American Legion and a couple of other entities, and we are really focusing around mental health. And so on October 1st and 2nd will be an event here in Forest Lake that starts at Lakeside Memorial Park, and we'll be welcoming our visitors. But we do have a young man named Caleb Wedger. He is running 100 miles on the Hardwood Creek Trail, and then basically turns to Sunrise, right? So North Branch, he'll go back to Forest Lake. So he'll be running 100 miles to bring attention to the fact that 100 Minnesota vets die from suicide each year. And so that's kind of the feature, or the mainstay of what we're doing. And then the American Legion is offering a community breakfast on Saturday. And sometime Saturday morning, all goes well, Caleb will arrive back in Forest Lake, finishing his 100 miles. And there's also an expo. And so again, that will be a mental health expo, not just vet health, but mental health in general. And that will also be at the American Legion. And we do have opportunities for some partnerships and scholarships, or I should say sponsorships with that. So those are the handful of things right at the moment that we're working on. Any questions?
So I don't know if this is addressed to you or to Dan or to who, but where are we at with our visitors tax?
That's conversation is planned for later in the year.
Oh,
Yeah.
Still
So
in
it's
the works?
still live.
And then, so as an EDA, can we be on your chamber email? Because I'm not a member of the chamber, but I think that would just be another way to be a little bit more connected and in the know about what's going on.
Absolutely.
I would love that.
And if there's anybody else that's not receiving our e-news, so the e-news, if you're getting it, it comes out every Friday morning.
I'm receiving it, so.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah.
And you probably do. I used to get it, but I think you nixed me, so.
Gotta renew that membership.
That's not me, honest.
Right, so, we have a little bit of time here, maybe, since this is a workshop, maybe an update on some development. You mentioned some developers coming up, but I don't know if, Ryan, if you have anything about, it's always good to hear from you once in a while as to what's coming down the pipe, and,
I can't think of anything off the top of head, so I'll have Ryan start that one.
Forest Hills Farms, or Forest Hills Preserve now. We'll be starting utility work in 2 weeks, so right after Labor Day. It's a 35-unit subdivision, residential homes off there of North Shore and Highway 97. Fitzgerald Flats, we're having a pre-construction meeting Thursday. That's that apartment building down by the government center there, and where they did the lot split to accommodate this site. There's also a lot of residential subdivision activity and meetings with several different developers. Potentially there could be 3 different sites coming forward. I think majority of them are looking at a 2022 submittal with an application. Potentially one is claiming they were going to submit this month. We haven't seen it yet, but they've been to Planning Commission, so that's nice seeing a lot of activity on that side of things. In Timber Ridge, we've had a pre-construction meeting. He doesn't know if he's going to start building this year or next year. He's going to be doing some culvert work on there since it's been so dry this year. Get some of that work done now, just to avoid some of the wet areas that are out there that they need to get some stuff done, so. A lot of nice stuff out there, obviously working very closely with Washington County and MnDOT on future projects that are planned. Our first one, Washington County will be reconstructing Everton Avenue or County State Aid Highway 33 from Broadway Avenue down to the bridge area or MnDOT facilities. That's a 2024 project, so that will obviously have some major safety improvements on that corridor along with pedestrian facilities on the west side of that project. In 2026, Washington County will move to 11th Avenue between Highway 61 and then the bridge overpass. That'll include pedestrian facilities on one side of that project too. City's been working very closely with MnDOT on Highway 97 between the new divergent diamond there in Columbus and the double roundabouts here in 61. They're planning for a 2024 project, but they did just seek some preliminary approvals to look at a very low-speed design that would include curb and gutter and narrowing things up considerably. That will have a increase in construction costs with that, with all the concrete work with that, so potentially that goes to a 2025 project, but basically addressing all the city's requests and concerns that they've heard to date, so that's very favorable there, and that'll also include pedestrian improvements on the south side of Highway 97 connecting to the Hard Creek Trail, so. Didn't catch really what I was mumbled all the way through. There's a lot of developments, privates, the county, the state, and then, you know, our local projects as well that are gonna create a very nice network of pedestrian improvements. Obviously with those projects, and then as we come through with our own local city projects, we're either doing pedestrian maintenance work or new work too, so you know, you're kind of coming out of the bubble where a lot of this stuff, you started some pavement maintenance work, you know, in 2013, probably 15, 16, we really started upticking the pedestrian trail connectivity in the community. And you can see, I mean, everything that you got out here now you got all the way through the schools, you can go that way, you can go that way, you can go that way, right? So there's a lot of that stuff that's coming. And you know, that's what a lot of people are moving to communities that want. And then obviously you got Forest Lake Public Schools that put the significant investment in their property with the new football field and everything that you see there. It's just, I think your development opportunities are gonna only increase because of all that infrastructure that's around here. Leela's expanding again. The other charter school has basically now in operation. So a lot of things are happening all over the place in town.
Say,
And
Ryan?
the Highway 8 project, that's, if you're not too familiar with that, they're basically, that's potentially a 2023, maybe 24 project, but Chisago County's leading that one because the area wants that project done faster than what MnDOT would be able to deliver it, so that's why Chisago County's leading that project, but that'll come up to the 35 area, all the way out to Carmel Avenue in Chisago City, and that'll be a major recon with pedestrian facilities on one side of that, potentially too, so imagine what that's gonna do to open up everything in the area too, so there's a lot of stuff happening between now and 2026.
Ryan, when you said maybe a low-speed option for 97, what does that mean?
MnDOT's got pre-approval to look at a 40-mile-an-hour road between 61 and the Divergent Diamond. I think they're running into a lot of issues on the environmental side through that very protected area by the DNR and all the wetlands there from Everton Avenue to Hornsby. Thus, they need to shrink the footprint up a little bit, accommodate storm sewer runoff, and then be able to accommodate some of our safety requirements that we were requesting east of there. So it's what the city's heard, MnDOT's heard, and for MnDOT to now start pursuing something that we've talked about, I think it's very favorable to pedestrian traffic in the area. Obviously, we got a lot of highway commercial movement down that corridor, and you know, some of the things that they earlier were proposing, you just like shake your head like, what are we even talking about this for? So one example, on the 55-mile-an-hour road that they have out there today, they were proposing these refuge areas for pedestrians to cross, which basically is 4 to 6 feet in width for some. Would you stand out there in the middle of Highway 97 and two semis coming this way at 55 miles an hour? That's what they were proposing. We're like, we're not going to allow that to happen. It just takes one chance, right? We're not, and that's, you know, now they're coming back with this. And that's exactly what we've heard from the community members when we've talked about Highway 97 the last several years. And you can say, yes, that's something now we can start talking about more, about allowing more pedestrian access crossings instead of having a child or a parent with pushing a stroller standing out in the middle of Highway 97 at 55 mile an hour with two-way traffic. And then we're also having MnDOT pursue a potential roundabout improvement at Highway 97 in Fenway Avenue. So with that, being in the works there, it'll allow safer turnarounds and access throughout the corridor, so.
Oh, yes, because it is such a primary artery coming in. That's the 40 hit me, 40 miles an hour kind of hit me, but I understand you're really constrained.
I think 40 is more than adequate for that corridor, considering the site distances, the traffic, the pedestrian mixed use. I often drive out of town probably anywhere from 35 to low 40s just because it's that tight, that dangerous, especially at night. If you are doing 55, you're probably not seeing everything that you would need to be seeing alongside the road anyway. There's just too much distraction on that corridor to be driving that fast.
I agree with everything you just said. I used to commute out of town that way, and the backup was a nightmare before they got that divergent, the new bridge. I can't imagine what going back to 40 would be, though, with all the truck traffic in the morning, all the sand trucks that like to flow out of, they come down 97 from Scandia, and they go out to 35. I can't imagine where they're going to go and what that's going to do to morning commute. But
Well, everything's smart intersections now. So they'll be able to track all that. If there's a roundabout at Fenway, you're just gonna flow through it. You're not gonna have to start, stop. Just think if a sand truck had to start, stop, what that does to traffic. Obviously, then we got the one signal at Everton. That's all linked with fiber between each intersection. So they'll be able to time that individually to account for what's over at Hornsby and the Divergent Diamond.
Ryan, I just have a question. So at one point, the city there was and I don't know what the term is, but there was a ratio of available lands for development, and we were contemplating whether or not we continue to sell any of the city land. Does the city feel that there's enough land that's on the market to continue with the development that might be coming or is proposed?
That's probably not my area to address, but the land that you guys are trying to sell is not zoned for residential homes.
Right, I understand, but just in general, like if trying to talk about getting more land available for sale, and the potential, if that's the case, it could be zoned differently if we so choose at some point, but I know that.
There's quite a bit of land for sale basically for housing stock, residential.
Okay.
There's plenty of that. There's a lot going on in that market. That obviously is with the housing shortages and the crunches, they're looking to expand and provide more inventory. So that's where we're getting a lot of, Ryan mentioned a lot of interest, but there's plenty of land out there for that.
Okay.
All the areas that we're in conversation with developers are adjacent to public sewer and water. And that's how it develops in almost every city around you too. It's right there. We've had a lot of conversations a little further down the road of some of these places, and then they find out that, I gotta get sewer and water too to serve my site. Kind of comes and goes on those conversations, but there's a lot of land adjacent right now to sewer and water, and it's just playing that game when the time's right. Then, lumber went up, so things kind of went quiet. Now the lumber's starting to come down, so things are starting to pick up again on the conversation-wise. There was one player that was ready to go now and wanted to go now, but nobody could meet the demands of that developer. So that's why they're probably coming back in 1 year later. So.
I just have one other thing for Ryan. Our building is next to a project that's being redone, it's Fifth Avenue, and working real closely with the Bolton and Mink employee, Chad Quigley, and he's just been great about communicating to the property owners of what's going on, a daily text, and so hats off to him and Bolton and Mink for the communication. It's huge. It's helped out a lot, so appreciate that.
Chad's our main construction coordinator in this area, and he knows how important it is to deal with property owners, especially when you got businesses adjacent to these projects and what you guys go through on a daily basis. So this is what he's done for a long time, and this is why I keep him in this area.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he's doing a great job, so. Anything else?
As long as we're doing the hats off thing, I really want to, applaud the city maintenance team. I think that the job they're doing out at Fenway Park has been amazing. I think the way they take care of Lakeside Park, the downtown area, it's just looking pretty tidy, and tidy is good, taking care of what we've already got. And they're gonna do a little project at the Triangle Park this fall. Using the boulders that they took off of the beach a few years ago, they're going to build the boulder structure for planting, and so that's exciting too.
Okay, anything else? Do we have to do official adjournment on a workshop? Okay, you want to make a motion to adjourn?
Also move.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Adjourn.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night.